Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. How do I categorize my relation to my next guest? He's the cousin of my cousin, but technically not my cousin, and that's probably how I'd classify him. And if that's not the most confusing, he grew up in St Paul, Alberta, only to move 1,900 kilometers away to St Paul, Minnesota. We've worked together, played hockey together, delivered Christmas hampers together for the Knights of Columbus. He's traveled the world, not necessarily always for vacation, but to help those in need, and a situation that also found him at the epicenter of a global pandemic. The man who can eat one of those giant, colossal sandwiches from the Co-op deli in one single sitting, a longtime friend, my adopted cousin, Derrick. And I'm leaving your last name out on purpose because that alone might make this one of the more interesting podcasts I've done. So those who know will know, and those who don't will just enjoy the interview we have at hand. And I guess we'll learn a little bit as to why it's just Derrick. So thank you for joining me. Always enjoyed your company, sense of humor. How about we start with growing up in St. Paul and some of your experiences with that?
Yeah, I grew up in St. Paul and just north of town, just 5 minutes away. But grew up with a bunch of rascals that I still call my friends and got into all sorts of trouble. I don't know if you remember the drive-through incident.
No.
Okay, we had a Tim Hortons in town, and my friends and I decided to pull a prank on the drive-through attendant that ended up with us going to spend a couple hours just at the local detachment after they phoned my buddy, and pretty much everybody around town heard of it, and then we had to get a talking to, and they called our parents, and luckily we didn't spend the night in jail, but we did have to do a set amount of push-ups. But yeah, Phil Charette took it easy on us. I guess.
Wow, okay. There's a blast from the past that a former RCMP member from this community that we played hockey with. So that must have been your get out of jail free card then, with knowing it was him.
No.
Okay. I never knew about that.
Oh man,
troublemaker Derrick. Okay, you played a lot of hockey growing up in town here.
I did. I played all my years of minor hockey, and then I thought, hey, I should try and be a professional at this. Let's join the suffering Junior B Canadians.
It was a low point in Junior B hockey here in St. Paul.
It was. They almost folded the team. Ben, you were a coach, weren't you?
I wouldn't call myself that. I was a helper of sorts.
You opened the door. That was the important part.
It wasn't much. We were so short on the bench that didn't have to open the door very often. The guys would come for line changes. Like, sorry, there's nobody to change with.
Exactly. Some nights we had 10 people. One night we had to forfeit because there was a pair of brothers that decided to fight one another. And it was right in the hallway to our dressing room, and everybody saw. And the other team was just like laughing their butts off. Yeah. Big thanks to the Cold Lake Ice. They had a good run, but I think Wainwright's taken over that league.
Yeah. Well, you were I packed it in after that year as the coach's helper, let's say, and you guys went on to have a little bit more success in the following years. I mean, we had a past guest who talked about that, Joe Young, and him kind of rebuilding that team. So you were a part of that. So as a player's perspective, what were your thoughts at that time?
My second and third years, our second year we went, I think it was like 331-2 or something. Then we turned it around to above 500, and then we had a bunch of local guys, and then we started getting more traction, and eventually we had an above average team, and we made it to the playoffs, and we had a sad first round exit in Game 7 against the Lloyd Bandits, but what can you do? We had a lot of good times on that bus.
Well, it turned the team around because it's been one of the more successful teams now in that league. So I know Joe said hats off to you guys, even though we won't mention names. I know you know who he was talking about, but there was a fellow with playing hockey with glasses on, and they weren't wearing full cages at the time either.
Yeah, he wore glasses under his visor, and one time he got just crumpled, I guess, and he came up and his glasses were all crooked, and we're like, yes, welcome to the Northeast Alberta Junior B Hockey League.
Let's go find some contact lenses for the next game.
Maybe he was better without the glasses than with the
Yeah.
glasses,
Yeah.
but who knows?
Yeah. Okay, so you played a little bit of senior hockey too in Elk Point with your brothers?
Uh, so my brothers and I, we played a couple games of Junior B where we all played together. And then, yeah, after Junior B, my brother started playing senior in Elk Point, and I played a few games with them. I went to provincials with them after my overage year of Junior B.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun playing with my older brother. And then I played about a handful of games before I called it a career. I got tangled up with a guy, and then I hit my head on the boards and decided I had one too many concussions. So I packed her in.
The only reason you didn't go pro, right?
Yeah, that and the I don't know what else. What else kept me from going pro? Probably the skill level.
You can see why I appreciate the dry sense of humor, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about where you moved on from your life in St. Paul, small town St. Paul. You broadened your horizons. Where would you put yourself as, okay, it's a bit of a long road to get from St. Paul, Alberta to St. Paul, Minnesota. So what's happened kind of in between in the direction that your life has gone in? And this might explain why we're not using your last name a little bit here too for this podcast.
Yeah, so after playing Junior B hockey, I went to a Bible school, let's call it that. Playing Junior B and working all the time. I guess my commute to work gave me a lot of time to spend with the Lord. And then I felt this call to go to Bible school and eventually go into global missions. And so after just continually saying yes to God and what he had, it's brought me to all sorts of places, to meet all sorts of people, all in hopes of teaching them about Jesus and what he's done on their behalf and what they can have if they trust in him for salvation. And so that is a bit of what I do. And so through that, I've been overseas several times with both as a student and as a team leader. And so I've led several teams overseas. I've been on teams that have coached hockey in Mongolia. I've been on teams that have taught English along the way. I've been on, just this wonderful journey that I wouldn't really trade for anything. I didn't think that, a kid from a 5,000 people town would, consider uprooting his life and potentially moving to Asia, where it's a lot more large cities than he's accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so what brought my wife and I to Minnesota was a call from a missions organization, and they asked us to help begin a branch of their organization that teaches young people what global missions is like, what it's like to be a global worker. And so we do that through teaching times, through various cultural activities, and having them rub shoulders with older global workers who have worked in the field. We also do that through different cultural kind of exchange opportunities where they go overseas for a time to an area of interest. It can be any one of the large world religions that they have interest in, and they can work alongside some workers there and discern kind of where they fit in the big picture of God and his mission for the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're obviously talking Christian based here. Is it a group of denominations that work together, or is it through kind of one typical type? Because you were raised Roman Catholic, right? So
that is true.
Is it through a Catholic based group, or is it like a
yeah, so our organization is predominantly Lutheran.
Okay.
And so it's a Protestant organization, and we have workers from a variety of backgrounds, but we're Lutheran by conviction is what it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You mentioned you moved to Minnesota with your wife, so that part, how you met her was through your your journey through the missionary work that you've been doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I met her through school. On one of the very first days of school, we were playing soccer out front in the yard, and I have a lot of momentum behind me, Ben, don't I? Well over 200 pounds compared to my wife, who is smaller than I, and we were both going for the soccer ball, and I'm like a locomotive. It takes a lot more for me to stop, and so I just bowled her over and stepped on her foot, and it's been smooth sailing ever since. Right, honey? She nods, begrudgingly, I think.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Where's she from originally?
She's originally from Southern California.
Right on. So it's always fascinating how people meet and get together a lot, especially when you grow up from such like far distances apart, and then quite a different, I guess, would be a different area of the world as far as like culture and everything like that. How we were raised compared to how that's raised. So that's fascinating. Maybe we'll have her on the podcast one time.
Maybe.
I didn't get a no yet, so okay,
Yeah.
Think about it. So from getting together, moving to Minnesota and everything like that, it was always interesting at the time. We mentioned in the intro, you found yourself at the epicenter of a global pandemic when things broke out. We won't say what that epidemic was. I'm sure people can draw their own conclusion, or necessarily where it was. But can you talk a little bit about what that was like as things started unfolding? We were hearing about it from the other side of the world per se, but you were kind of in the midst of it.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of interesting just getting all these phone calls from home and people asking, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And it's, for the most part, the early murmurs and whisperings were kind of that it wasn't that bad. I remember telling my mom where I was headed and what I was doing, and she's like, there's a disease going around, or a sickness. And I'm like, "Mom, it's going to be fine. Nothing bad's going to happen." And lo and behold, 4 days after we arrived, the whole city shut down.
Right.
And so we were only allowed to visit the business owner we knew, because we were staying in a hotel and we didn't have any means of getting food or subsistence. So we could go basically from the hotel to our friend's business, and then we could go to the grocery store. And that was pretty much it. All the streets were totally empty. They were spraying various chemicals on the streets at night, and people were kind of dressed up in hazmat suits of all kinds, and there was officials walking around making sure people were obeying the public orders and wearing their masks. So as we sat and waited for some response from the government, the officials would pass and we'd all clamor for our masks. So we were doing the mask thing before it was cool. But then as part of our trip, our hotel was supposed to house people who were exposed to COVID. And they told us we couldn't stay there anymore. So we were about to be homeless. And then the government put us up in another hotel. And then we were the only ones staying in this rather large 4-star hotel. But the heat was not on. So it was pretty chilly at night between meals of ramen noodles. And yeah, had ramen for dinner and breakfast just about every day. And it was like that for 10 or 11 days before we got things sorted out with the government for them to repatriate us. And then I spent 2 weeks of vacation just in Eastern Ontario. It's kind of like jail, but nicer. We had yard time and time we could exercise and food brought to our door. There was no slots in the thing, but it was on a military base, and where they did a lot of, not dog fighting, but they did a lot of flight exercises. So when we did yard time, there was just jets and bombers and stuff like that flying around, which was kind of entertaining. But Yeah.
So the whole experience from the time that you were quarantined from when you were overseas to when you got back to Canada, how long did you basically spend in, I guess you would say, isolation the entire time?
Yeah. So we intended to be gone a month, and we were basically gone just maybe one day beyond our expected return date. And so, um, yeah, it was 10 days of being shut down in the city, and then we spent 2 weeks out in Eastern Ontario.
That was, you said it was like being in jail, only nicer, but I was like, how would you know? But there was that time you mentioned earlier when you pulled the prank and you spent a couple hours at the local detachment. So, okay.
Done some hard time.
With all the travel, because I had asked you, what are some thoughts that you want to talk about? And you threw at me, you have no, how did you word it? No travel mercies?
Yeah, so
Okay.
in Christianity, often they pray for kind of like smooth sailing or like the absence of trouble, whether it be from immigration or where you're headed in the country you serve. And I guess the biblical basis may not really be there, because if you look at the Apostle Paul's life, he was definitely imprisoned and beaten and shipwrecked several times and told to go elsewhere. And so I think it's kind of comes with the territory. And so I'm not surprised by anything at this point. But I have been told by other global workers that I have an exceeding amount of trouble when I travel. And so I don't know how my wife decided that I was the one she'd marry. Maybe she didn't know what she signed up for.
Maybe she felt like she had to look after you.
Maybe she didn't read the terms and conditions.
So, what are some of the hiccups you've experienced through travel?
Oh, man. So the day we were married, we got married on the border of the U.S. and Canada. I tried to walk across because I'm not going to sit in this big metal bird with a bunch of other people breathing on each other. And so I walked up to the border agent and they took my passport. And then so they denied me entry to the United States on my wedding night. And I was like, wow, you guys are real cool right now. Big fans. And so I had to buy a plane ticket that was a few $100s to fly from Vancouver to Seattle, where it takes more time taxiing to and from the gate than it does when you're like in the actual air. So there's not much of a flight time doing that. But eventually we were reunited.
Why wouldn't they let you just walk across the border?
They said I didn't have a valid reason for entry, even though I needed to certify my marriage license and be there in person to do so. And so they're like, oh, if you fly, it'll be much easier to get in. And I'm like, but I'm right here. Just be cool, man.
Well, in the last 3 years, a lot of strange things have happened. So I guess, yeah, that should be par for the course, right? So,
and that's just a recent one. Oh, well, when we first went to move down to Minnesota, we were driving our car, and we get south of Regina to North Portal, and I also got denied there. They deemed my reason for travel and entry into the United States was not valid, even though I was moving eventually for work. I was going to change my status eventually and apply for a work visa, but then I had to drive from Regina to Calgary, and I had to buy a first-class ticket to fly immediately to Minneapolis, St. Paul. And they said if I got denied there again, it would have been 10 to 15 years. I would not have been able to enter the United States. What? So they just really don't like me over there. But I got in somehow.
Somebody must have liked you.
Yeah.
Actually, it brings up an interesting point, because you were always big into sports, like with hockey. I know you and your brothers all are big baseball fans as well. Living in a place like Minnesota, like St. Paul, Minnesota, offers pretty much every major sport. Have you had some interesting sporting events that you've got to enjoy there? Or?
Yeah. So my mother-in-law gave me money for Christmas one year, and I went to the Winter Classic where the St. Louis Blues actually just kind of pummeled the Minnesota Wild at Target Field, and it was minus 30. Yeah, without the wind chill, maybe.
Wow.
That's how cold it was. And then I've been to several Twins games. Once was on our anniversary, and I put my arm around LaDonna in the bleacher section, and this lady said I was encroaching on her personal space, and that led to an argument where we had to go get the usher, and she was screaming at us and berating us, and then the usher went to talk to her, and she threw a hissy fit and stormed off and kicked over a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
And yeah, a few families were kind of what am I trying to say? I don't know. I lost it. My train of thought derailed. But yeah, they were just like drawn to how calm we were in the face of that lady, just like screaming at us. We're just trying to enjoy the Blue Jays.
Why did she feel you were encroaching on her?
Oh, I bumped her leg when I put my arm around my wife. And then earlier she had said to a grandfather and his two grandsons that if a foul ball or a home run was coming towards her, that she'd punch him in the face if they reached into her personal space. And
wow.
So we knew we were in for something eventually. I don't know. She was just ready to explode, I think.
At the risk of offending females with a certain type of name, was her name Karen?
I hope not.
Didn't catch it.
I wouldn't want her to sully the Karen name.
Wow. It was that bad. You had also mentioned you have some future plans down the road to live amongst Buddhists.
Yeah. So my wife and I feel called to Buddhist populations in Asia, and that can be in a variety of places with a variety of security concerns. So I can't say too specific, but we do want to be global workers and work overseas for many years is the hope, Lord willing.
So I guess without getting into the details of the where so much and what you might be doing, but why Buddhists?
Yeah, that came after a lot of prayer. I was in a friend of ours in her parents' basement, going to a conference and just praying about it, and eventually, yeah, that answer kind of comes. And at first you're like, oh my goodness, what did I just ask God, or what did I just get into? And then you kind of just experience this peace of knowing that God goes with you, and that the work you're doing is for Him and for His glory, and that there's people every day perishing, not knowing the good news of Jesus, and just the idea of having this indigenous expression of the church where it's the church's, or an iteration of the church that looks a lot like the people group in all its glory as it's kind of reconciled with God. And so there was a missionary of the past who his name is Hudson Taylor, and he used the analogy of not being able to sit comfortably in a wooden pew in a church that is full of people, and many across the world just don't have that opportunity to receive the message of Jesus and have the Bible in their own language. And so that's part of what my wife and I hope to do.
Right on. Do you guys have like a time frame that this is going to happen, or is it still kind of in the early stages of the...
It's kind of in the middle stages. We're looking for opportunities to serve in what might be before us. And so we have a couple years left with our organization. And so once that is through, then we'll move forward into a candidacy phase, is what it's called.
Gotcha.
And more serious final preparations.
Now, the how would I word it? I guess the missionary work that you're currently doing. What are you looking beyond that? Is this something that you've got kind of an indefinite plan that you're going to be doing this, or is there other plans down the road to you're doing a lot of traveling. You're married. And are you guys thinking? This gets kind of personal. Are you thinking about family? Because that's kind of a juggling act in itself too. I know there are families that do that, but is it? I mean, what's? Have you thought about what's beyond this right now, or are you kind of enjoying the ride as it comes right now?
Probably the ADHD in me would be enjoying the ride as it comes, but the reality of some of those factors is, quite something we take quite seriously and factor in and realize that, if we're blessed with a family, then it's, in some respects, the clock starts ticking to come home and eventually finish their education, probably here in North America. But as it sits right now, we hope to be there as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I know that kind of puts you on the spot. I just got a look from your wife there. It's like, come on, man.
Don't worry. It's a common question from everybody nowadays.
Perfect. It's very enlightening, Derrick. And like I said, the work you do has a little bit of sensitivity globally. There's some of the areas you go into. So I appreciate you telling us what you can and how you can about what it is that you're doing there. And something we've never done on this show. So that's part of why I find it completely. We joke. Everybody says, "Oh man, why should I be on? I'm not completely interesting," but I find it fascinating. It's not something we hear a lot about and what goes on in the world. So thanks for taking the time to do that and share that. And I know you're a dedicated, loyal listener, Derrick. So I know you know the last question that's coming up. You're here on the podcast now for someone completely interesting. So you're on the spot now. If you had to pick someone to recommend for this podcast, who would that be?
Wayne Gretzky.
It's got to be somebody local.
Local.
Or I guess, you know what my mandate is like not necessarily famous because we already know Wayne Gretzky's story.
That's true.
So let's someone who deserves to have their story brought to light.
Oh man. That's a toughie.
Yeah.
I have to pause so I can think of it. But
so sometimes I kind of lead. So people you've met through your experience through your missionary work, or maybe some of the people you grew up with in St. Paul that you'd like to put on the spot, or.
Oh man. Oh, I think I got it.
Okay.
Haven't talked to him in a long time. Super cool dude. Jeremy Hall.
Oh yeah.
He's cool. I admire what he does from afar.
Right.
And cheer him on. Yeah, starting with his, being diagnosed with hemophilia and just seeing all the obstacles he overcomes, and to see him as like a Paralympian from our town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, just super cool to be.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I was friends with his brother.
Anybody that knows anybody in St. Paul should know that name too. So that's actually a really good suggestion.
I'd say my father, but he'd be here all afternoon. But that's not a bad thing.
No, one of these days I'm going to follow him around with a mic. Another one of my coworkers there is your dad. So thank you so much again. My guest here is Derrick. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure you like and subscribe via your favorite podcast provider. You can find us by searching Poolin Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. And we've also got us on social media. You can find us Facebook and Instagram by searching Poolin Radio. Once again, thank you so much. My guest, my adopted cousin, Derrick.
After you get done one of these things, you realize how much you forgot.